Thank you for joining us for another episode of Mixed Views with your favorite mixed couple, Humna and Tyler.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, babe.
This is episode 6, and today we're trying a little bit of different way of pushing out these episodes so we can get more content. And so we have 2 this week, episode 6 and 7, and 6 is going to come out on Tuesday, and 7 is either going to come out on Wednesday or Thursday. But we're going to try to put out 3 a week, so we can put one out on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of each week. That way we can get more content out and hopefully build a bigger following that way, because putting more content out is the best thing for us.
Yeah, because I think right now our struggle is maintaining a schedule with every other important thing we're trying to get done.
Right, and so I think we kind of figured out that the best way to do things is to split our topics up into separate episodes. They're going to be shorter episodes, like 15, 20 minutes, but we're going to be putting one out every day, and that way I think we can focus on one topic each day and kind of get our thoughts on it. So
yeah, plus it's one of those things where you want to try and keep the, I guess, attention of you guys. So having it being shorter, it'll be more likely that you'll pay attention and stick around longer.
Right, and I think we're still learning how to put these episodes together. We're still learning how to put show notes together. And we're still learning about what kind of content we want to put out. So making the episodes shorter, more concise, putting more out each week is just probably better for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about whether prisoners incarcerated
prisoners.
Well, I don't know. Prisoners kind of...
It's the same. People that are already incarcerated and have not been released yet are allowed to vote.
From prison.
Jail. From their cell, are they allowed to vote?
Now, just a little bit of background information. There are currently 2 states in the United States that allow incarcerated people to vote from prison, and that's Maine and Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we're talking about this right now is because it was an issue brought up in a CNN town hall last Monday as to whether felons should be able to vote while incarcerated. Now, the question was originally posed to Bernie Sanders, who a lot of people see as a progressive socialist Democrat, where he is all about kind of, just to sum it up, making things free for people, free school, free health care, just kind of he thinks his ideas will grow wealth for the poor in America. I have some thoughts that I think people aren't really seeing the full aspect and just hear the word free.
Right.
That's another argument. So he was posed the question of whether felons should be able to vote while incarcerated, and his answer was yes, even for terrible people, because once you start chipping away and you say, well, that guy committed a terrible crime, not going to let him vote, well, that person did that, not going to let that person vote, you're running down a slippery slope. So he is the senator from Vermont, one of the states that allows incarcerated felons to vote, and so, of course, it's not really surprising that he would choose this side of the argument.
Obviously.
But, like I said, there's only, out of the 50 states, we only have 2 that allow this, Maine and Vermont, and this is how it's broken down. After prisoners are released, in 14 states, plus Washington, D.C., you automatically get your voting rights back upon release.
Mm-hmm.
In 5 states, once you are released and discharged from parole, you get your voting rights back. 21 states, once you complete your sentence, parole, and probation, you get your voting rights back. Now, in 6 states, depending on the type of conviction, you have to petition to the state government to get your voting rights back.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Iowa, offenders must pay fines and fees to court and apply to the governor or president for their voting rights back. And only in Kentucky are you barred from voting again unless the governor pardons you from that punishment. Now you can go, there will be a link down below to a USA Today article to see all of this information, but what do you think about this?
I don't know. Me personally, I think if you are incarcerated, you should not be allowed to vote. And I know that sounds bad because a lot of times when people are incarcerated, there have been studies shown that a lot of times it's just people who couldn't get out on bond. So they haven't even been convicted or anything, but they're there because they couldn't get out. And I don't like that. That's a whole nother thing with the system. But I think as long as you're in those cells, like, as long as you're in that square, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. Now, as soon as you get out and you do your probation, like even once you start your probation, that's when I think you should be given back your right to vote, because then you are a citizen again. You know, you're no longer in a however big cell where you're distanced away from the rest of the world.
So you're with those 14 states plus DC that allows convict. I mean, I think we should limit this topic to convicted
felons.
Mm-hmm. And 14 states plus Washington DC allow felons their voting rights upon release from prison. So as soon as they're released, you know, whether they're on parole or probation, they get those voting rights back.
Yeah, I think that's the right thing to do.
Now, like, in my point of view, I'm open to having the conversation of allowing certain prisoners to vote from prison.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mean all of them.
The big question was, okay, so you're going to allow the Boston Marathon bomber to vote from prison. You're going to allow murderers and rapists to vote from prison. Now, he basically said, Bernie Sanders basically said yes.
And I think that's wrong.
I think that's wrong too. I'm open to the conversation of allowing people with certain convictions the right to vote. Now that, again, to use Sanders' words, it's a slippery slope, because now you're going to have to put more work into seeing who can get voting rights. So maybe you either just give it all or you take them all away. But there's an article from West Virginia Metro News. It's an opinion article, and I read it. What this journalist says in here, I kind of agree with. Actually, I agree with a lot of it. And he starts out by saying, going to prison, by definition, is a punishment. Incarceration follows a determination by way of the rule of law that the individual must be separated from society and that certain rights granted by them by birth will be denied. So that makes sense to me. The only, I think, argument that I can understand is, okay, is it a punishment or is it rehabilitation?
Right.
To me, it plays a little bit of both, but okay. But the rehabilitation, if you're going there for rehabilitation, you probably don't have that big of a crime against you. You know, it's probably a nonviolent drug offense, or, you know, if it's a punishment, you're probably a convicted murderer, a rapist, somebody who's going to jail for 50 to life or even on death row. Should we allow people like murderers and these violent offenders, should they have a right to vote in our elections and our policy? To me, my initial answer is no. They shouldn't be allowed to vote on policy.
Okay. If you follow us on social media, I'm on live right now. My mom just commented and she said, quote, "I believe those that have not committed serious crimes such as murder should have a voice if they are living honest lives in prison and are trying to turn their life around." And I agree with my mom 100%. Like, if you're in there for a misdemeanor crime, or let's say a drug possession, and nobody was harmed, but you're focusing on you you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, getting your GED, all of that, making sure that you're not getting in trouble while you're in there. Once you come out, I think you're considered rehabilitated and you should be given your right to vote again. Now, if you happen to go back to that same pattern of habit that you did before, that's when it again gets in the gray area of like, okay, are you really rehabilitated or were you just doing this to get out? So then that's where it's like, okay, should you keep your writing vote if I see that you're starting to do this or what's going on?
This journalist also points out another very good point. Another very good point. He points out, okay, if we convict somebody and send somebody to jail for violating election laws, should we still allow that person to vote from prison? Isn't that a little ironic? You send somebody to jail for violating election laws and then you allow them to vote from prison?
Yeah.
Like the whole reason they're in prison is for violating those laws. Mm-hmm. Doesn't make very much sense.
No, I think, when it comes to Bernie, he's so about getting the attention of everyone that he's always saying things. Like, I feel like if he could just be a little more specific in him saying, yeah, prisoners should have the right to vote, and instead of just saying like prisoners who have not been convicted of serious crimes, who are focused on themselves, not causing any kind of disturbance. Those are the kind of people who deserve their voting rights, even if they are still incarcerated doing their time.
Like I said, I'm completely open to having the conversation to allow certain convicted felons, because I think we're just talking about convicted felons at this point. I'm open to the conversation. I'm not fully on board yet. I have a lot of questions. As of right now, I stand by allowing them to receive their voting rights back upon completing their debt to society. Mm-hmm. I think that makes the most sense. I don't agree, with certain states where they have to petition for them, or when you're on parole or probation after prison is kind of when you're reintroduced to society. You're gathering, you're getting a job, you're trying to make money, you're trying to live on your own.
Right.
You're trying to build those relationships that you may have lost. So I think the thing that makes the most sense would to be to allow them their voting rights during that period of time.
Right.
Because that's another thing that you introduce to society.
I don't know. I don't know. It's a lot of gray area, and it's just also the fact that the way that our prison system itself is this big old gray blob, because there are no specifics on, how long you're incarcerated if you're just waiting for your trial and all of that stuff, where for him to just outright come and say something like this, it doesn't really make sense, and it just kind of again puts him in one of those radical groups that's like, oh yeah, we're just going to give everybody all of these rights and they're going to get all of this and all of that and all of that, and nobody's going to really understand what the possible consequences are of that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think the argument of saying, oh, so you want the Boston Marathon bomber to be able to vote, I think that's a very far-fetched argument. Like, I get your point, but I don't think that's the right question to ask. I don't think that's the point of saying. I don't think he's arguing on behalf of the Boston Marathon bomber.
I think
in this position, I think he's arguing on behalf of certain American citizens that he doesn't see a threat where their vote may matter. Mm-hmm. But at this, I get the point of that question. I think it's a question that should be asked. I don't think it should be the main question, though.
Right.
So, yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those, like I said, it's one of those issues where there's already a lot of gray area surrounding it. And if the potential president did want to, implement this, be like, hey, once these convicted felons get out of prison and they start their probation or their parole, we will reinstate their voting rights. I would be behind that, because I'm pretty sure by then there'd be like a line out of, okay, if you've done this kind of crime, you are not allowed.
Yeah.
But to outright say it right now, it's just kind of putting the attention on him, because I almost feel like no one's really paying attention to him anymore. We already know he's all about the socialism and all that, so there's nothing really new he could say.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like this is one of those things where he's like, oh yeah, if I say something like this, everybody's gonna talk about it now.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening to episode 6. Episode 7 will be out in a few days.
Yes.
All the show notes will be connected.
We'll have show notes and a legitimate article.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot we're trying to figure out.
All
but
right.
trust me, this time we'll stick with it.
And stay tuned for episode 7.
Bye.